What's up? Welcome to a new episode of Schmovie. This is episode number 395. My name is Steve. I'm one of the co-hosts, and as always, I'm joined by
Ron.
And John.
Wow, I got some melody there. I like it.
Yeah.
There you go. How you guys doing? Did you have a nice Thanksgiving break?
Yes.
Yes. Quite a bit of travel. How are you? Yeah, North Carolina, 2 parts, an hour away, split in time between our two mothers. It's really cool though. That's really cool. How was you?
Wow.
How was everything for you guys? How was that?
I mean, I guess as good as it could be. We had a last minute scenario where we ended up having to host it at our house, which was
Oh wow.
not planned. We don't have a very large house. I live in a townhouse, but it wasn't the entire both sides of the family or anything like that. But we put it together. It went well. It is kind of nice not having to take the kids anywhere. That was kind of a nice little silver lining of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Because they have all their stuff here, and I don't have to chase them down in places that they don't normally play in. But that was nice. Selfishly, that part was nice. But food's good eats, good fam, good time. So yeah, it was good. John, what about you?
We kind of did a local Friendsgiving thing. Both of our families are down in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's like a 12 or 13-hour drive. And we have friends that used to live here and then moved to Alabama and come back up. Lately, they've been coming up around Thanksgiving to see all their friends up here. So that's a good group to go spend the day with. But yeah, awesome. I mean, we'd love to see that loss of family. Like there've been a lot of ways over the years that just not having extended family in the area has been kind of like you feel it. And definitely Thanksgiving is one of those times where, I feel like whether you love or hate your family, you're supposed to be forced to sit down and have a meal with them.
For sure.
And I happen to love my family, so that I miss it, but I also think the found family, local Friendsgiving traditions that people form now, I think that stuff can be super meaningful as well. So I think it is it's a thing for which to be thankful. And I think the idea that all you're supposed to do is eat, it's a very that's a very welcoming premise.
It is for sure.
Very good.
I made 4 chocolate pies over the course of the weekend for different occasions and different people.
I don't know if I've ever had a chocolate pie.
Like a chocolate chess pie. I do the kind that's like almost like maybe I'll make a pie and let you.
Maybe you should, John, because I mean that sounds like a blind spot here. I mean, I've had the chess pie from Dangerously Delicious downtown. I don't know if it's like that one.
I love Dangerous.
You can imagine that, but with chocolate. I mean, it's got that kind of gooey, custardy.
Okay,
it's like more towards the gooey than the custardy, but it's got a little bit of that feeling, and then it's got a little bit of a crispy kind of sugary top to it.
Everything I'm hearing sounds.
Nothing wrong with it.
That's what she said. Also,
yeah. All right. Well,
she's so dirty. Have you noticed that, Ronald?
Yeah, she is. She is.
All right, well, back at the pod here.
Here we are, back in the Schmovie minds.
There it is. I guess we're going to go into our required viewing, which was my pick from 2 weeks ago, which was a movie called I'll Take Your Dad. I want to say at the top of this section, I'm sorry, guys. I'm very sorry, guys. This is one of those things where, like I said a couple weeks ago, it's like, I see people talking about these movies and I feel hoodwinked a little bit. I got, however you want to say it. It's been on my list for a while. But when I was picking something, trying to stay in that like horror thriller something vibe, it's the first one that popped up. And I was like, sure. And 20 minutes in, I immediately regretted selecting it.
Well, did this happen to either of you guys? When I found it, the actual title was listed as "I'll Take Your Hour and a Half," which I thought was
it was weird.
It was a weird title. No, well, it did sort of have a weird kind of like if Shudder made Lifetime movies kind of feel to it or something. But I don't know. I feel like the required viewing feature is designed to house the risky bet. And, we don't do a lot of talking about so bad it's good or guilty pleasures or movies. We don't do a lot of picking on movies just to rag on them. But I do think this is a nice little berth in the show. If there is a movie that even if you knew it was bad and wanted to share the experience with us, I feel like would be an appropriate place to share it. I think the problem with this movie is not so much badness as that it was so bare bones And we've seen this kind of bare bones thriller done really well before on an indie budget. And so there's really no reason why they couldn't have pulled this off. And it seems to me that it comes down to like direction and acting, or maybe even cinematography and acting, that are the things that kind of leave this movie feeling sort of middle of the road. And it's a little too middle of the road to be schlocky and fun in that way. And it's a little too silly and schlocky to genuinely be like a drama or work in that way. And I almost think too, Steve, the premise, don't you think the premises are at battle with each other? That this movie's got like,
yes,
it's got like the premise of the guy in the country who disposes of bodies, and there are ghosts in his house because of all the bodies he disposes of. The gangs bring their bodies of people they've killed out to him. He dissolves them in acid, I think, in a tub. And that's his operation. And his daughter knows about it, and she sees ghosts. That's a movie. The other thing is the person who's supposed to be dead turns out to be alive, and then you have to keep him hostage, and then there's a whole siege narrative that comes up around that. I felt like this movie was kind of battling between wanting to be like a siege narrative and a creepy I see dead people kind of thing, and neither one of them felt overly original, but I didn't feel like it was. I almost felt like the ghosts and the dissolving of the bodies, that felt like window dressing once the movie really got going. It didn't have that much to do. I don't know. I don't mean to be the one to talk about this. You're the one that brought it in, Steve. How did you feel watching it? You've already apologized, but let's go deeper.
I just feel like I was like opening credits. It was like, it felt like those opening credits. I don't know if you guys got that vibe, but like it felt like the quick edits of like the Saw series to me.
Oh yeah.
Like the bathtub with like the drop cloth and like that green kind of filter, like that opening sequence. I mean, because honestly, like my recollection of seeing people talk about this movie, I had a completely different kind of movie in my head. I never watched the trailer. I didn't do anything. Same. Like I heard, all the word that I heard around it was, I had a completely different, even like tone. I thought was like way out of left field from what I expected from a year or so ago when I heard a lot about this movie. And I feel like it was just like, it was like immediate when the movie started, and like, the way that the credits opened and the music that was playing and just like the vibe of the movie, it immediately like felt completely different, like 180 from what I had expected. And from there, it just kind of really, just kind of spiraled out for me. I just feel like, I don't really feel like there was really any kind of saving performance. I don't feel like there was really any kind of like great sequence even in the movie that, was interesting in the least. And the point you made about like kind of two movies at odd, both probably half baked in their own, that's probably, you do that when you don't have enough, of one or the other to really make a feature or some, like barely an hour and a half movie. But this was, I don't like to rag on movies. Like I want to watch things because I want to enjoy them, especially when I've heard good things. But I did not enjoy this movie. And like, by the time it gets to the end, it's just like, it really started. It's one of the ones when we've done it for this section where even at my selection, I was like, this feels like a chore to get through the end of this movie. I was like texting. Choice, I was like, I gotta start. I'm sorry, guys. I'm texting
when it's your choice, and you can feel that. I think it's fun though. I think I'm like, oh man, I can't wait. I'm so glad I'm sharing this experience with people. I'm a little sorry if it's me.
That's true.
That if I mean, we've had movies that wore on different people's nerves for different reasons, whether they were slow paced or whether it was production values or whether it was a stylistic thing. Or whether it just wasn't a movie that was as good as you remembered. But I think this is that middle ground movie where it's not incompetent. It's almost not interesting. It's almost not bad enough to be interesting. What was your take on it, Ronald?
So I don't really like the rag on, especially like scrappy small indie projects.
Right. Sure.
But one of the issues that I had was tone, and like you were saying, John, it was two ideas really fighting each other, and the issue was like, I would have been okay if it had the budget that it did, the acting that it did, and it just stuck to one of those things. But the fact that it didn't really touch on the magic, the supernatural element enough, nobody ever acknowledged it out loud. It was a lot of like, what the hell is that? And there was no like, oh my God, is that a dead person in this space doing things or having a presence in this house? that was weird to me. And
it felt like the girl had been seeing the ghost for a while,
yeah,
and she was just kind of halfway used to it, or so. I mean, you know what I
yeah,
mean? It felt like a weird version of not showing us the reaction, like you said. We didn't get the
Yeah.
emotional connection to
yeah.
it at all. That
And
was a good point.
And I think just that part alone just didn't make me connect with it. I mean, in fact, I thought that the subject matter was so dark that it made me more sad than enjoying the movie. I was just like, I feel like there has to be some like give and take on the idea that like dead people are just in this space. Like it, just seeing those the dead kid and the dead like and people's legs getting chopped off. I think you have to have some emotional leverage in order to
It
have
also
that
had
stuff.
the sort of Breaking Bad problem of like, oh, there's characters of color in this, but they're
Yeah,
all like murderous gang members or
yeah.
dead bodies, you know.
And or calling women bitches whenever they got a chance
Yeah.
to.
Yeah,
It's just like that stuff is really off-putting. And I think there's an effect that's happened in the last 5 years. I call it the streaming movie effect. And it just isn't exclusive to Netflix, where people, I swear to God, man, in the past 5 years, people have suggested more bad movies to me in that time than I've ever been suggested in my whole life. And some of it is just because it's accessible and it's in front of you. You know, it's like, oh, as I watched on Tubi, there was this movie, and you're like, have your standards dropped? You don't go to the movies anymore. So like, you don't understand that like there are things that are better than this that are put in other places.
Yeah.
And people are just accepting anything that's called a movie. And I'm not saying that this is like the worst of the worst, but this was rough. This was rough.
Yeah, I feel like also like I always am like so excited, and there feels like a sense of discovery when you see like a really great child performance in a movie.
Yes.
And the girl in this was not good.
No, she really wasn't.
It was the opposite of it.
And like the dude, like imagine if that dude had been played by like one of those character actors that you see and you never get to see do this kind of role. And here he is doing this kind of role, you know. Instead, it's this kind of I mean, I don't know. It's like it felt like I wanted to see like, was this shot in Canada or something? Everything about it felt like this. It's like it just was nothing. Nothing and nobody that I recognized, you know.
Yeah.
And I also
know one
think
of the
that,
actresses, but yeah.
Oh well, no, I thought I recognized that the main woman,
like
in
the
it.
victim, yeah.
But I then when I looked at her IMDb, I was like, maybe I don't, you know. Sometimes I think I recognize somebody, and then I look and I'm like, no, maybe I don't, you know. Maybe this is just somebody who has a familiar face or whatever.
Yeah.
But no, and again, when I said kind of like if Shudder made Lifetime movies, I really do think it had that kind of production value of like this is kind of for you to put on and go, okay, we watched a movie and then get on with your evening. I mean, like there's nothing much that's going to grab you. I mean, when I think about the good version of this kind of thing, where it's like, you know, like a movie like Blue Ruin or something like that, that's super bare bones and super simple, but the acting is off the charts. The pacing is so tense. The camera work is involving. There's a way to do this kind of thing and do it in a way that really grabs you. And Steve, that's what I was picturing when you told me the premise of this. My mind went wild with like, oh, that sounds so creepy and disturbing and interesting. And the movie didn't really want to deal with like the promise of the premise is one of those things that one of those screenwriting terms. And I don't think this movie fulfilled the promise of the premise.
Yeah, I gotta agree.
Dang.
I'm sorry, guys.
No, don't be sorry, because I want to free us up to like bring us one that you hate. Bring us one that keeps you up nights because you don't get why people like it. I mean, I do think this feature can be a fun place. So I don't think there's any shame. There's no shame in required viewing.
Yeah,
I appreciate the support.
Yeah, sure.
Who's up next, John?
I'm up next, and I'm gonna, I had this movie selected before you told me what your selection was last week, or a couple weeks ago. So the coincidence is that this movie has the word "dead" in the title.
Oh,
let's go.
But this is the oldest movie that we've watched for required viewing. This is from 1945, the movie Dead of Night. Now, we talked about the Lady Killers. I looked at our podcast feed right before this episode, and about pretty much a year ago, we talked about the Lady Killers from 1955, which was made by Ealing Studios, a studio that was mostly known for their comedies in the 50s. But in 1945, they made this horror anthology film called Dead of Night, which has like several different horror stories by different authors, filmed by different directors. And we'll talk a little bit about that next week. I'm not going to bore you with all those details now, but this is one of those, people talk about this like it still maybe has some juice to it, or like it was one of the rare occasions in that era in 1945 for there to be an English horror film. They were sort of banned for a while during the 40s. And I'm not really sure why. Maybe if it had something to do with the war effort. At any rate, and I'm not sure why it would have anything to do with the war effort. Now I'm kind of wondering. I kind of want to find it, but like, what's if you're looking for the film Dead of Night, you will find that there is another film from 1977 called Dead of Night. We're not talking about that. You'll find that Bob Clark, director of Black Christmas, had a film also in 1974, the same year that Black Christmas came out, that was called Death Dream, which is also known as Dead of Night, but we're not looking for that. We are looking for the 1945 Dead of Night, which is a little bit harder to find. It's on Screambox, I think, and the Roku channel. But it's out there.
It's on Canopy.
Okay.
Which Canopy, yeah, again, that's a great free streaming service that you can get through your local library system. If you have a library card, you can get a free account and watch all this for free on Canopy.
Yeah. And if you don't have a library card, here's an opportunity to get one. You can sign up for one online, get a temporary one, get Canopy until you get your physical. I've done that before.
Yeah, it also works if you're a college student, or if you're if you're enrolled in a university or college, you can use your student ID and your education email address, I think, to get a free account there too. But yeah, Canopy's pretty slick, man. They got a lot of great stuff, especially when you go deep dives like this. We've mentioned it a couple times with some of the picks here, but Dead of Night is on there, and I just added it to my queue on Canopy. So
I just saw that all it says on Wikipedia is horror films were banned from production in Britain during World War II. So it did have something to do with the war, but no explanation as to why they were banned. I guess people didn't want to see unpleasant imagery on the screen when their houses were being bombed and shit like that. But like I've heard of people that I know. I've heard people that I know that have been through a truly traumatic experience say that they lost interest in horror and violent fiction after they lived through something that was truly traumatic like that. So maybe wartime is not a good time to sit down and watch a horror film. Although we're in perpetual wartime now, though, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're so jaded.
That's accurate. Yeah.
Anyway, Dead of Night from 1945. Every year, I guess we'll do an Ealing Studios film. And this is our entry for 2023.
Dead of Night.
Very good.
Okay, cool. Thanks, man. I'm excited to watch something a little older. I'm down.
So what's next, man? I guess over the last 2 weeks, it's been a bit of a mix of what we've been able to watch. Some things in theaters, some things at home, some TV shows. So I don't know, Ronald, why don't you start? What's something that you've watched over the past couple of weeks that you wanted to mention today?
I mean, this is also an anthology of sorts. Fargo, season 5?
5, yeah.
Season 5. Finally, season 5. It's back.
Man, so we're coming off of season 4, which was divisive, if people like to say, divisive,
as the Brits like to say,
divisive. Also aluminium,
also privacy.
I think all of those things were associated with season 4 of Fargo.
Yeah. And that, no offense to this season, but it really stuck out like a sore thumb, just in terms of tone, just in terms of whimsy or lack thereof. And we're coming into season 5 with something that feels like a little more on track with what we've known from Fargo, and elevating it even more, I'd say. I don't know what to say about this so far. I mean, see, the third, I actually went out my way to watch the 3rd episode today. It lost me a little bit, but I'm still into it.
I think it I wouldn't say it lost me. I would say that it did a third episode thing, which is it settled into a groove a little bit with the story. There were a couple of character check-in scenes. When you have a show, sometimes you have an episode where you don't really have a character in the episode much, but you do a character check-in scene. Yeah. And they can be kind of shoe leathery kind of scenes, like a little exposition, a little remember what they're up to. This episode had a couple moments of that. Whereas the first two episodes, I think, were just one scene after another that were propelling this thing forward. I think the new stuff we got in episode 3 was great, though. We really focus on the killer Munch, old Munch. I find him fascinating. And I also find the sort of like, there's one edit that's the boldest edit. There's an on-screen like time jump kind of moment that it's one of the boldest things I've ever seen on a television show.
What?
So
I'm like, what? Okay, but yes, it's.
But I get what you're saying about like the first two episodes felt like this is a slow burn fire that's catching fire fast. You know, it's like it's building towards something, and then the third episode felt a little bit like a placeholder episode compared to the first two. But 100%. I still think that stuff, that ability this show has, as you will know from other seasons, Steve, to like just slow down and focus on a character and give them an episode, or do an episode that doesn't fit the vibe of the show necessarily. Like a lot of these cable shows, they do one episode a season that's like that. I love season 4 of this show, but I do think that what you're talking about is absolutely right, Ronald. It was all these different elements competing with each other that just didn't quite click with the kind of clockwork that say season 3, season 2, season 1, like those seasons, even with their extraneous elements, they felt like there was something kind of exacting about them. And season 4 felt like some elements didn't quite fit with each other, but there was still, great characters, great actors. And let's just talk about that. What this show does is bring these actors into this world that you're so glad are in this world. It reminds me of the fun of, a Coen Brothers movie's coming out. Who's in the cast? And you hear who's going to work with them. Even though this is not the Coen Brothers, we should be clear. This show is based on their works and refers to all of them, not just the movie Fargo, but it's not made by them. But the way that when you hear John Hamm's going to be in it, or Juno Temple's going to be in it, or Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall is going to be in it, or Lamorne Morris, the list goes on of who is in this show and is great in this show. And you look at past seasons and talk about how great David Thewlis was, and talk about how great Carrie Coon was. This is an actor showcase kind of show.
My standouts right now, Juno Temple, obviously, Jennifer Jason Leigh, John Hamm, and what Lamore is doing in this season is Steve.
I haven't even. I started the first.
So far,
episode.
He's the soulful good cop. Like so far, he's that. Every season of Fargo has some semblance of a good cop who's trying to do their job. Yeah. So far, he's that.
There's a scene that rivals John Wick. Like there's a scene.
Oh yeah.
Rivals like the whole scene, and everything happening in it is Juno Temple and him in it, and it's just so intense. It feels like a horror film mixed with John Wick. And it's shot well. It doesn't feel like TV, and I think that's what I loved about season 4. It felt very cinematic, and this feels very cinematic.
Epic somehow, even set in 2019, it feels like it's taking an epic scope.
Yeah, it almost feels like you're watching a piece of like a movie property that exists. Oh, you are watching, but you know what I'm saying? Like almost a bigger thing, like. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. What John Hamm is doing is really unique. And this is like, John Hamm's an asshole in a lot of things. He's a special kind of asshole in this one. He's a special kind of focused. And I don't know if I've ever seen him this focused in something. Like he really has like a purpose in this season.
And this show has played around with that idea, Ronald, of the kind of, I think setting it in 2019, they are clearly playing with the sort of what's happening in America that we might recognize. And I think even in season 3, which was set like not in the recent history, I think it was set maybe in early 2000s or late 1999s or 1990s. I mean, I think there was a sense in that we were getting into this kind of Trumpy modern era of truth not having any foothold. Like the season 3 storyline between David Thewlis and Carrie Coon is all about her being the person who knows the truth, and it doesn't do her a damn bit of good. And he's the guy who like knows the truth doesn't matter, and so he's able to work his dark magic on everybody. Roy Tillman, the John Hamm character, to me, he represents that kind of Trumpy America, but in a different way. But he's got the same kind of like cult of personality, forcefulness about his character that you can see that. And again, I don't think the show's dealing with symbols over much. It's still characters, but there is something that it's commenting on that I feel like when this show comes back, they've got something on their mind.
For sure.
And I think that, the John Hamm character seems to be the main vessel for like whatever the target, whatever they're kind of saying is bad in the world. He seems to be linked very closely to it. I think Joe Keery, is that his name? From
is that the younger actor?
The son, Gator. He's great. He's great.
There's a scene. He's saying that symbolism. There's a scene. That scene in the one of the last scenes of season 3 when they're like in that tight space talking. Him and Lamar. It's
you mean in episode 3? Yeah,
episode 3 when they're talking. It's very clear that there is something Trumpy about all of it, and it was on the surface at first. Mm-hmm. It's like right about to kind of get out of there, and then he says it, and you're like, "Aha! I knew it! I knew it! I knew you were that kind of person." It's really cool, man. It's cool the way that it approaches it, and it makes it very clear that there are like. I like that this has a lot of heroes and a lot of villains.
Yeah,
and it's very clear who is. I mean, we might get some surprises. I think we are going to get some surprises, but I like that there are some clear people that are like menacing people right now.
And I also like the Fargo tradition of putting sort of sweet, innocent characters in the middle of all this. I think her husband Wayne is so far this kind of lovable guy that they've already created so many situations where he could by accident or due to some violence come to something bad, and they've that you're not going to see him escape without some of that. But part of the joy of this show is the way they can kind of play with that conceit of there are characters that are sort of inside the horror of what these stories reveal, and then there's characters who are sort of outside and maybe a little bit in denial of the darkness of the world that they're in.
And I think that when two characters are going to meet on the show, I mean, and I guess I should talk about the other actress that I really enjoy, Richa Morjani. I'm gonna say Richa Morjani.
Yeah, from Never Have I Ever.
Never Have I Ever. Gorgeous and acting her ass off, and really has this this innocence about her that, but also at the same time, like Lamore's situation, she is a minority in a space, and there's like these walls that she hits sometimes that people aren't really, I think it's cool. I think it's really cool. It's realistic. It's very realistic.
Well, they've done that before with the female cops.
Yes.
Being the sort of like in the boys' world of the cops. And I think now, again, maybe that's another way this show set in 2019. It makes sense, is to say that now that's, that's a black man or an Indian woman, I believe. Although we haven't really gotten to know her character that much, but just also seeing people try out their Wisconsin or South Dakota accent is part of the fun of this. And I will say, I mentioned Dave Foley from Kids in the Hall. He's having fun with an eye patch and being like the sleazy, not really even sleazy, just sort of like the efficient lawyer of the Jennifer Jason Leigh character. So they have a lot of scenes together, and I think there's going to be some fun stuff coming with his character, just because he seems to know some stuff that he's not revealing, and I think that's fun. And I love that Noah Hawley, the guy who makes this show, pretty much every season he's cast a couple 3 actors like that who you just go, oh, what a cool thing for this person to get a chance to be in this type of show. And Dave Foley is I like a lot of sketch performers. He's a really solid actor.
He's like a lawyer of a Bond villain.
Right. No, that's totally it.
He's so good. But yeah,
I feel like even the little bit I've seen of it, like him in the first episode that I've watched, I was just like, I couldn't help but think, like, between him and Mark Hamill from House of Usher.
Yes.
Like that, like super efficient, not much to say unless it matters. Little lawyer, consigliere kind of character. I was like, this is a good run for those kinds of that role.
The guy who's always trying to stop people from saying what they're saying.
Yeah.
Yep. And like, you can't say that to me. And let me do my job. All that stuff. No.
Yeah.
We're in the bag for Fargo.
Yeah, man. So, what have you guys been watching?
Yeah,
I'm
Steve,
super
something
curious.
you've seen. You said you've been to the theater recently.
Well, I know. Well, the ones I know, I don't think you guys have. Well, I finally saw the Marvels, which I thought was fine. I mean, like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like we said, middle of the pack Marvel.
It was very middle of the pack Marvel. Yes, very middle of the pack. There are a couple awesome sequences in it. Some of I think you guys mentioned it on the podcast already, but like that fight sequence when they finally kind of get their kind of like transfer of powers down, like that all that was really cool. But yeah, very middle for me. I also saw Disney's Wish, which I took my daughter to see on opening day, and
What did
I
you
thought it was
think
really,
of that?
I thought it was good. I mean, like it's not great. It's not like top tier Disney or anything like that. Somebody a friend of mine, I saw a post online, they were like it felt like a rewrite or two away from like a classic Disney film, and I couldn't agree more.
Oh wow.
There's some really great characters in it, and there's some really great songs in it too. But as a story, actually Chris Pine is really good in it, like as like the sorcerer king bad guy in the movie. But that role specifically felt like it was like it could have been like a classic villain if a little more time had been spent on like the story. But I don't know, I don't get like the hate towards it at all. Like I don't understand what people are watching or looking to watch. And maybe I need to like change my Twitter bubble or whatever, like I don't get it. I feel like most people that I know went and saw it, really enjoyed it. I know Aaron loved it, and my
What
daughter
about the
loved
animation? What about the animation? Like, because to me, it looks a little like it's halfway between computer animation and cell animation.
It does.
But it doesn't seem like it has the same artistic polish that, say, like the Spider-Verse animation does. It's almost like a Disney attempt to kind of go halfway to that kind of animation, but not quite fully finished. I don't know. I couldn't decide if I thought it looked good or not, honestly.
I mean, I think it looks fine. It's nowhere near that level of any kind of comparison. Honestly, even some of like the other like Illumination stuff, or like I feel like, or Blue Sky stuff. Like I think some of those are doing way more than Disney has been doing recently.
Yeah.
And that sucks to say, but I think that's the reality. And that's kind of, I think, why they're struggling. I think that some of the stuff is struggling with story, some of it's struggling with the animation. But all to say though, like it's a fine, entertaining with some really great musical. Like there's specifically two songs, like the My Wish song, or I think it's called My Wish or Wish. And then Knowing What I Know Now is another big song in the middle of the movie that, I mean, they're incredible songs, like moving songs. Which I would be surprised if one of the two of them doesn't get nominated come Oscar time, even if the movie doesn't get much attention otherwise. But yeah, I thought that was fine. It's not great, but I enjoyed it. But the one I wanted to mention, and I know John, you said you saw it as well. I went and saw Thanksgiving. The Eli Roth slasher film last weekend, right after Thanksgiving weekend. So that was kind of fun to see it, around the holiday. Obviously, when they released it, I wanted to try to see it in theaters, just having heard some good stuff about it. But I kind of came away from that really liking that a lot. I obviously, like, I feel like the only thing I think or wonder, and actually the day we're recording this, they announced that they're developing a sequel to it. They've already announced that he's going to come back and write and direct a sequel. It's going to come out in 2025, around Thanksgiving. But it felt very much like, this is based off of the Grindhouse, like, fake trailer reel that was playing when they came out, in between Death Proof and Planet Terror. That was obviously like kind of like a play up on the Grindhouse style, and playing one of all those holiday slasher films of like the 70s and late 70s, early 80s. But and I think like this was obviously building out from that. This felt more like honestly, it felt straight up like an I Know What You Did Last Summer, kind of story in terms of the beat and the plot, which I honestly thought was a smart thing to do. And I've actually been listening to him talk about the movie in a couple of podcasts recently. And it was really interesting, like, to kind of hear about like the decision to kind of go away from, I guess, what they first had intended for Thanksgiving to be, even when it kind of was a germ of an idea to go beyond that fake trailer. But in the end, like, I felt like it was a very fun and entertaining slasher movie, especially to have another holiday themed slasher film, which I love to have around, like, whether it's Halloween, Thanksgiving, Christmas. There's always those ones that you'll put on, or that we can put on. And I kind of walked out of it thinking that this would definitely be something that I would watch around this time of year, probably every year. And it's got some awesome kills in it. I'm not saying that it was great or anything like that, or anything super special, but it pretty much was exactly what I was wanting it to be, which was just an entertaining slasher movie with a cool, there's a little bit of a whodunit element to this, much like I said, I Know What You Did Last Summer. But an interesting thing I said, like when I went and saw it with Lauren and Brian, and like at the end of the movie, we're watching the credits. Like, I've been thinking this a lot recently, especially with movies like this that really kind of are rooted in a very young cast.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about it on the podcast in a bigger scope, but I mean, like, the idea of there being like no like young movie stars. Even for a smaller slasher movie like this, it doesn't have a big budget. It's like there are people in this movie that a lot of younger moviegoers and younger people will recognize. Like, there are characters in this movie that play roles in Disney series and social media stars and like TikTok star. Like, that's what the equivalent is now. And it was odd watching it because I feel like I don't know what if there's enough to those actors, actresses, personalities, like if that's contributing to like the audience going to see the movie, or is the audience going to see the movie seeing it because it's the horror movie right now, or it's Eli Roth, or it's a slasher movie, or they thought the trailer was cool because like I recognize like Gina Gershon's in it and Patrick Dempsey's in it, but then that's the opposite of the audience that I'm talking about, because they probably don't even know who those actors and actresses are. So it's like a weird it's a weird crossroads. Like, I've been thinking a lot about recently when I see these movies, because I'm just like, who am I sitting in the audience with? Is it audience of horror fans? Is it an audience of like Addison Rae fans? Is it the dude that's in Disney Zombie High, that plays one of the main actors in it? Like, I don't even know his name. I just recognize it because my kid watches that show on Disney Channel. But like, I don't know. It was interesting because like I did enjoy the movie. I'm saying that flat out. Like, I would recommend it personally. Like, if you want a cool, fun slasher film. But like, the thing that sat with me, and it's not even really the quality or the movie itself, was just like, I keep thinking about those things. Like, what is bringing people to movies now? Because like, we had that podcast where we talked about like everything is broken. And we may even have mentioned it during that briefly, but like, so many movies are failing on paper or, financially or whatever. And I just can't like, have ideas, but like, placing what it is that's actually bringing people to see a movie that's not, a blockbuster. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. I don't know. It was a director. Like, do the director has more weight now for certain things than like anybody in the movie? And I think that's probably accurate in some cases, but like, I don't know. That was a tangent. I'm sorry for going on that, but
no.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, but Thanksgiving. But back to what did you think of it, John?
Yeah, I think I probably was a little bit cooler on it than you. But I think I essentially agree with what you said. I mean, the fact that this exists at all as a movie, they had to find some way to resolve, like, how do you take a trailer and spin it into a movie?
Yeah.
I think I was kind of missing like, to me, it felt a little bit like, well, why does this exist if it's not going to be doing the 70s, 80s thing? But I had the same thought you said of like, this feels like a 2000s thing. And maybe that is the smart way to play it, because that's already like a nostalgic move. It's just for a different era. So I think to say disappointed would indicate that I had some preconceived notion of what this movie was going to be. I think the only preconceived notion I had was it's an Eli Roth thing, and he's coming into the space where you could argue, even though I'm not really a fan of Terrifier at all, you could argue that like those films and films like it have kind of come into that space that was made by Eli Roth.
Yeah.
And this was his like a little bit of a stab at, no pun intended at all, but like a little bit of an attempt at kind of getting in that zone of like, oh yeah, now we're in this world where there's these kind of extreme horror films coming out that don't have to be like midnight movies and festival movies. They can be sort of mainstream hits. So I did feel like Eli Roth having fun, making a movie that I think people are going to have fun with. And, I mean, I do think it goes out of its way to be over the top in some kind of funny moments. There's one moment that I still don't quite understand how that dumpster lid coming down cut that woman in half.
That sounds crazy.
But that's the kind of shit that happens in an Eli Roth movie, maybe.
I was like, yeah,
or like a
too much
trauma
logic
film
to it,
or something like that. But I think that's the kind of like. So I guess I would say that there are some fun kills, but there's also some moments where a kill turns totally absurd, and you're like, well, I can't really take this seriously as a horror effort at this point, but I can sort of see it as a fun movie you're supposed to see with a big crowd and scream and make a lot of noise and talk back at this, the movie and all that stuff. So I don't know. I feel like this movie is, while I was sort of hoping for the genre pastiche a little bit of the 70s 80s movie, I also know people have done that nostalgia and that retro vibe of even just making movies that feel like those movies. That's already happened. So I can see why they moved on to something a little different. Yeah, I mean, I think I saw it like in a very sparsely populated afternoon screening, and I was thinking to myself, this would have been much more fun to see with a crowd late at night. And
I to note, we were in a pretty packed theater actually when we saw it too, and the audience was definitely into it, which was kind of cool.
And I would also say maybe this is the kind of movie that, because it's got kills that are wacky and it's got a kill every 10 minutes or something like that, it is one that would live on in the kind of, watch it at home with your friends kind of way. We've talked about this with various horror films, slasher films. There's a certain rewatchability that some films have. And this one, I think I could probably at least get through it one more time if I was sitting there with somebody that I wanted to find out what they thought of it. So,
yeah. Cool. What else? Oh, I wanted to quickly mention I watched Nyad on Netflix. It's like one of their award plays, specifically for the acting categories. I thought it was great. I don't know, have you guys heard about this or know about it?
I've heard of it, and I know of it, and it's kind of on my short list, but I have not gotten around to it.
I mean, again, something I didn't have really much awareness of. I knew a little bit about like the story of Diana Nyad, like the true story that is based on, just in terms of like the swimming feats that she accomplished, earlier and later in her life. But yeah, I don't know. Like I just was, I kept seeing it pop up on my feed, and honestly, like the big thing, my huge takeaway, I thought the movie was great. Like I immediately recommended it to my parents to watch because like this is a movie you're gonna love. And like I don't know what that means about that, but I'm just saying like it's a feel good. It's got that sports, accomplishment, achieving, especially like because what she's achieving is later in her life, which like no one found to be possible. At the time she's doing it, there are younger swimmers attempting it at the same time in real life. And failing at it as well. But it was just very inspirational. And Annette Bening is great in it. But god damn it, did I not leave this movie just saying, why do we not have more Jodie Foster? It's one of those moments where I was just like, and I forget what we watched recently where we had the same feeling about an actor and actress. We were like, I just want more of them. It was very recent. I forget what it was, but I had the same feeling watching this movie, coming out of it, just being like, Jodie Foster is one of the best ever. Like she is just, I love her in everything she's in. And it made me even more excited for the new season of True Detective, which is coming out earlier next year, earlier next year. It just made me even more excited to see her in that. But she plays, her close friend, coach, that kind of gets her through the training and this feat that she's trying to accomplish. What's his name? Rice Fans. He's in the film as well. He's great. He plays like the boat, the captain of the charter that they kind of hire to kind of do this with them. But yeah, I don't know. Again, like it's just one of those. It didn't feel like I don't know whatever that stigma is of like a Netflix movie. I mean, it's on Netflix. But like it's made by the documentary team that made like The Rescue and Free Solo, but this is like their feature, I think maybe one of the first feature films that they made. Jimmy Chin, I can't remember the other co-director's name, escapes me, but yeah, I don't know. That was my surprise of the week. I think was like I just threw that on passively, heard people talking about people being great in it and being very like kind of inspiring and motivational. And it 100% is. It's one of the better Netflix movies I've seen this year for sure. And I would definitely recommend it, especially if you want the reminder of how great Jodie Foster is, and just like why let's get more Jodie Foster in the world. She's just wonderful in it. But yeah, I think that was the only other one I wanted to mention. What else have you guys seen?
Ronald?
One of you saw Napoleon, right?
Yes.
Oh, okay. What do you got there? Oh,
Wandavision. Got the Wandavision
set. Man,
the box
look, set. It's been a while since I've seen it.
Been a while.
Masterpiece. The show is a fucking masterpiece to me. It's my favorite show.
I bet it plays great now. I mean, if it still holds up, I bet it plays great now. Honestly, though, because it really did have something unique going for it, and a reason to exist, and the characters that we were invested in, and all that stuff.
Yeah. Also, didn't tell you this, but I'm watching the MCU movies in chronological order, in event order. I guess chronological order. I'm now getting to Guardians, the first Guardians, and the first two Guardians are one after the other.
Right.
And then I've been trying to watch some of the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. stuff in between to respect it. Because of the book, I'm like, man, they tried to make this show and they really tried to connect it to the movies. But WandaVision is a masterpiece. It is like, to me, it's WandaVision, and then low-key right underneath it. It's just a special show with a lot of and maybe after having Zuri, it hits a little different, just like the idea of what
right, what her essential conflict is.
Yeah, her conflict, and then I guess loss in a way too, what you do with loss, and how you process it, and what you do to protect yourself in all of it is kind of something I can relate to in a way, and that with her, Wanda's whole motherhood thing. And the arc of that whole thing is just incredible. And in this version of it, man, I know that people don't like physical media, but fuck, does it make a difference in the quality when you watch it on a physical media?
I keep hearing that physical media is making a comeback, even with younger viewers and stuff.
Something's happening. It's weird because the Best Buy thing came, and I'm like, no, there's more. There's been maybe 50 or so physical media releases that I know of each month. That's triple what it used to be. It is a weird time. These boutique labels. So there's a Super Mario Brothers, the one from the 90s, has been released from an Australian label. They get these odd titles, they make them look the best that they can, and they release them, and people love them. It's really cool to see this. And Disney putting these out is really neat because it doesn't seem like a thing that they want to do forever. But so if you can grab some of these things, I say grab them. Even if you want to wait till they get a little cheaper, because they're not cheap. This is $50 for this.
The way you're describing this makes me think of the gas crisis episode of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. When it's when you're if you can find it, grab it, them buying barrels of gas and Charlie jumping out of the back of the van yelling wild card. Yeah, good times.
Wild card, bitches.
Yeah, that was one of my favorite episodes.
Anything else on that, Ronald?
No, just it's just a gorgeous show with a lot of cool the two leads killing it. It's just acting at its highest. And I thought that everything was going to be on that level. And then I had to wait until Loki to see, anything even
kind of come back around. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. Yes. Loki is showing us that people are trying to act their ass off in these things. So it's interesting. So, what else have you guys?
Well, since you're holding up a product, I mentioned this to you guys. I'm reading a book. Very nice. Look at this book. It's got
that's really nice.
It's got the gilded pages. Ooh,
wow.
Got the built-in bookmark. Oh, it's you have to put on a button-down shirt if you're reading a book that has a built-in bookmark. But this is a book called A Masterpiece in Disarray.
Okay.
And it is an oral history and beyond an oral history. There's different chapters that are oral history and others that are just straight research nonfiction. It's about the making of David Lynch's Dune. And
wow.
that movie's not like one of my huge touchstones, but I have always found it to be an interesting, flawed movie, both where it sits in his filmography and also as an adaptation of this huge book that we also know, of course, Jodorowsky tried to adapt it and that didn't happen. And there were others as well. So David Lynch got this in basically at a time when he had turned down doing Return of the Jedi. So he was not quite established as the David Lynch that we know now, but he already was kind of an odd, interesting guy. And he had made Eraserhead, which was pretty odd, but he'd also made The Elephant Man, which was a very mainstream kind of drama. So I don't know. This was an interesting story. I don't necessarily want to read a book about why a movie's bad or why a movie failed, but anything that's kind of big and flawed like that, it's cool to see this book that he talks to as many people as he can as far as the interviews. So you're finding out about pre-production, the actual production, post-production, all that stuff. And I just watched the David Lynch Dune in tandem with this. I had not seen it since they've rescanned it and it's all high res now. Beautiful and it's set design and costume design in some scenes. Honestly, like the first third of the movie that's set on the Atreides. Well, not on Arrakis. Before they get to Arrakis, the set in the Atreides family's
the palace.
That stuff is beautiful in the David Lynch version. This weird wood paneling and ornate stuff. I don't know. I was blown away by the set design. It is a truly weird movie, though, and part of it is because it becomes incoherent because you can tell they didn't get to shoot everything they needed to really make the story work. But also, it's just weird because even in the Denis Villeneuve movie, where you've got you're hearing people's thoughts and your people's voices are changing when they're using magic and all kind of wacky stuff that is like part of the high concept of Dune. And David Lynch has just always been an interesting oddball guy who makes his own kind of thing. So I'm in the middle of that book and interested in that. I wanted to mention, you mentioned Napoleon. I don't know. It's a big movie, Ridley Scott. People might have different feelings about where he is in his career. I think we've talked on the show about how we're amazed at his work ethic and how he keeps cranking out movies. I saw this thing that said this movie was announced when he was finishing The Last Duel in 2021. And it's like, shit, a guy who's 80 is announcing this movie in 2021 and then making this movie, this giant epic movie. Kind of crazy. The usual Ridley Scott issues, you could say, are there. There's some moments where the extent of the color correction, it kind of makes the movie a little visually murky at times. Other times it's very lovely. And I've seen people compare, this is what the original shot looked like, and here's what Ridley Scott did to it, as though bright colors that are really brightly lit is what you want in a movie. And I think Ridley Scott is doing something artistic, but there is still there's a little bit of digital noise or something I'm getting sometimes in his color correction. But that does not mean the whole movie feels that way. There's some scenes and sequences that are startling. And as you might expect, the acting showcase, it's the Joaquin show. I mean, he's doing something really interesting in this character. I just think that embodying Napoleon is something that you need a certain kind of an actor who's got some wild instincts and some real courage to the way they'll take on a role. And
no further.
I don't know. Honestly, the physicality, the fact that Joaquin usually plays darker, damaged, more forbidding, unpleasant people, and the fact that for all the war and death that Napoleon was responsible for, he was not, is in the movie anyway, is not depicted as an unpleasant person necessarily. I mean, he is kind of a weird little obsessive asshole, but I'm just saying he has moments where if this were the trashy version of this story and it weren't based on history, he'd just be killing people left and right and cracking heads and snapping necks. But instead, he's got to be slightly diplomatic, and there's rules of the society that he's in, and he kind of exists as a guy who the movie doesn't depict him as a likable guy at all. Don't worry, this is not a movie that but it does sort of depict the idea of how larger than life his ideas and his thoughts about himself were, and how he sat outside of the society that he was in and knew how to rally people and knew how to command that kind of loyalty that allowed him to really shake things up. I don't know if you knew that, but Napoleon really shook things up. But I mean, he gets a complex named after him, right? So I don't know. There's a whole, and also Vanessa Kirby as Josephine is incredible as well. There's some really fun moments. The lightest moments in the movie come between the two of them, and his kind of weird horniness and love for her is kind of a source of comedy in the movie. It makes him seem faintly ridiculous when he's also going around and trying to conquer the world and stuff. So I think a lot of people are going to say this movie is long. It is a little samey because you're not getting like, whereas Killers of the Flower Moon is 3.5 hours long. It's one story that you're following. So when you go from one scene to the next, there's a certain kind of narrative drive to it. This is not as long as that. It's 2 hours and 37 minutes, but it feels a little longer because it is still doing a little bit of that biopic thing of a scene ends and then just another scene picks up and it's like, oh, here's this important moment and here's this important moment and here's, you know, and sometimes the story is carried by character and narrative, and those moments are really satisfying. Other moments it is a little bit like, you know, you hear that how much footage gets shot for a movie like this, and I believe there probably was a much longer version of this that might have connected some of those scenes a little bit more.
He said that allegedly, apparently, the version that's going to be on Apple TV is going to be 4 hours long.
See, I don't know that it needs to be that, but home viewing, 4 hours you can do.
Yeah,
you can take it in shifts or whatever.
What if it gets broken up in episodes? Would you be okay with that, Steve?
Oh, that's interesting.
Because they could do that. I mean, they did it for what's the name? The Tarantino movie.
Yeah,
they broke it up on Netflix. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, the Hateful Eight.
Hateful Eight.
I mean, sure, maybe that helps people like know where to take a break, maybe. Like, but I mean, I feel like if you broke it up into like 4 episodes, I would probably still watch them all at the same time.
Right.
Like personally,
yeah.
Like if it equates to a binge still, if it's good,
yeah.
You know, like I would still do that. The math still is the same.
It's so strange how our minds do that, man. We could watch 20 hours or something. I remember lockdown watching season after season or something. But if somebody said it's a 3-hour movie, I'm like, don't you ever put a 3-hour movie in front of me. I'll punch you in the eye. Yeah. What about you? Would you watch a broken up one, John?
I mean, when I'm watching a movie like this, and if I'm ever thinking about the length of it, which in this case I was, so that's a sign of something that I actually was noticing the length, you know, and thinking about, well, I'll mentally do that job of like, if this was a television show, would this feel like 3 episodes or would this feel like one long episode drawn out? And I think that this, again, the sameness would hurt this if it were a show. You wouldn't be getting like new things in episode 2 that you hadn't seen before, kind of. Okay. But I do think mentally like, oh, this feels like a break. And there were a couple points in the movie where I would have thought, oh yeah, that feels like it could be the end of an episode if they wanted to do that. So I'm interested in the 4-hour version in a sense, because maybe having more scenes will fill out some of those historical moments so that it doesn't feel like a highlight reel in kind of a weird way. But the real thrust is the romance and the not the romance necessarily, but the love story of Napoleon's love for Josephine. His very possessive, very jealous, very like self-serving love. That, you know, here's a guy who really thought he was supposed to rule the world. And so in his mind, you know, any woman, like he loved her, but it was because of what was special about her to him was that she's precious to him. You know what I mean? It's twisted. But Vanessa Kirby and Joaquin Phoenix are great. And it's really cool people in the supporting cast too. Not a lot of recognizable faces that jump out, but some names like Rupert Everett looked totally different than the last time I'd seen him. But he's really good in this. So there's lots of little quiet turns like that are fun to see. And I just want to throw out there, since we're talking about watching something on Netflix, Scott Pilgrim Takes Off is so good.
It is.
It's so good. It's just really so good. Like, and it makes you realize what a cast that movie had in 2010. Yeah. That they got pretty much everyone to come back, and the names in the opening credits are insane. I mean, it's insane, and it's such a cool thing that they didn't just hire an American studio to do a pastiche of anime. They got anime directors, and an anime showrunner who had done, had worked in Japan. I don't know. It just, the look and feel of it is so. I don't even watch a lot of anime. It's not even my bag necessarily. But when it's inventive and it's got a cool style, I love to see that. And this show really does feel very handmade and very personal and very funny and very sweet. And it's, I think, a perfect update on the movie. Like,
yeah,
I think that's a pretty fucking perfect movie. People don't talk about it that much. I love Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Yeah, it's perfect.
And this is a great. The creator said he didn't want to come back and do anything else that wasn't something different. And I think they found a fantastic way to do that. To be like, this doesn't step on the movie at all. It's kind of a sequel and kind of not. But it is. I I was so full of joy when I was watching it. You know, it's one of those things.
Nice.
Yeah. It's really good.
All right, is that a show?
I think so.
If two people say "I think so" at the same time, that means we know.
Yeah. What's the plan for next week? Do we have any idea what we're going to be talking about next week? It's kind of. I tell you right now, I really want to make an effort to go see Godzilla -1 this week.
I want to see that movie so bad.
I have been seeing so many things about it, and I almost went last night, but I could not make the fan like they had that 8:00 fan screening, and I was so bummed out because I was going to try to make it work, but like people are just gushing over it, and I'm just in a mindset right now watching Monarch that I just want to see more Godzilla.
Yeah.
And if this is even better, I'm just like, man, I need to watch it this weekend. I need to.
Did you see the budget on that movie?
Well, I've been seeing that, but apparently that's a bit misreported from what's coming out now.
But it's just resource. Even if it's double that.
Even if it's 5 times that. Okay. Let's just be real. The number that they're throwing around is $15 million.
But the last one was like that. The last Shin Godzilla, that budget was like that. And it might have been 13 million versus the 15 million that they're saying. Shin Godzilla had a low budget like that, and it still looked damn good.
Yeah, I mean, whatever it was, anything sub 100, if it's real dollars,
Shin Godzilla also 15 million.
It looks amazing. I mean, so I'm excited to see that. I just wanted to put that out there. Maybe if we all have a chance to check it out, we could talk about that.
I want to see that so bad.
That's kind of it's kind of in the zeitgeist, it feels like, for a bit right now. So all right, cool. Well, movieshmovie.com is the website. You can go there to choose which podcast platform you want to subscribe through. youtube.com/movieshmovie podcast if you prefer the video element of the show. But yeah, next week we'll be back. John's pick for required viewing, Dead of Night from 1945. And again, it's on Canopy. If you have a library card, if you are a student, you can get it for free. If not, like Ronald said, just sign up for a library card anyway, because you should have one. Yeah, let's be real. But it streams for free on Canopy. So if you want to watch along with that for next week, that'd be great. And otherwise, we'll just kind of get a plan together behind the scenes, and we'll see you guys next week. As always, you've made our day. Thanks.
Bye.